Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we are looking at a premium that actually I think came out last week, but I was on vacation last week so I didn't get around to actually doing a review. But this is the Ragnar, the tier 10 Swedish scout cruiser. Yes, it's not a destroyer. No, this is a scout cruiser. I'm pretty certain of that. So what is the Ragnar? The Ragnar didn't exist, obviously, because very few things in tier 10 tend to exist. But if we look at the description, it says it's a large post-war destroyer with cruiser caliber guns. And the guns actually did exist. These 150mm guns, yes, this thing's got 150s, were built for the Tre Kronor class of cruisers. There were two of them that were constructed during, or were begun constructing during the Second World War, but weren't actually finished during the war, but were finished post-war, and then did serve in the Swedish Navy in the post-war years, until either being scrapped or sold to South America, as is tradition. So, while the guns did exist, the destroyer did not. So, what has wargaming done here? Well, let's begin having a bit of a comparison. And first, obviously, we're going to have a quick look at how the Ragnar differs from the Holland, the actual tech tree tier 10. The Ragnar gets a different speed boost. That's the first thing. Well, the Holland gets a regular engine boost, the engine boost 2, which gives you 12% for 25 seconds. The Ragnar gets 20% for 12 seconds, so effectively the inverse. So you get a bigger boost, but you don't get it for very long. However, the cooldown is relatively short. This is the same thing. I think this is the same one that the Italians are having. The Ragnar also gets radar. Now, she does only get 1, not 2 like the Holland. But it is a radar 3 with a 9-kilometer range, whereas the Holland has the radar 2 with an 8-kilometer range. The Ragnar also gets defensive AA 4, whereas the Holland, the Holland gets the 3. So the defensive AA 3 gives you 100% on the large caliber and 200% on the small caliber. The Def AA4 does the same thing, but it also increases your range by 15%. This is going to be important when we start looking at the actual values. So the Ragnar has noticeably more hit points. It's a scout cruiser after all, but does pay for it in maneuverability. The speed isn't great. That is the same problem that you have on the Holland. These things are rather pedestrian, the difference being that the Ragnar is a scout cruiser and does not have the same concealment. The guns is where it gets quite interesting. So these Model 1942 152mm Bofors guns are interesting. You get 4 of them. You have a pretty good range of almost 11 kilometers, and you have a 7% fire chance on these things. That is an almost French value of fire chance here. The armor piercing is for 150 is not terrible, but also not really something to write home about. The high explosive really is where it's at. And a 2.8 second base reload is not terrible either. It's not the 2.1 from the Holland, but you do get a significantly better fire chance and you do more damage with these guns. In return, the Ragnar has no torpedoes whatsoever, at all. She does, however, have AA. And while the large caliber AA is kind of a bit meh, and as such doesn't really do an awful lot, the small caliber AA is absolutely monstrous. And do remember, she's almost got twice the small caliber AA of the Holland. And do remember that the Def AA increases the range by 15%. So you get a 3-kilometer range on the small caliber AA when the Def AA is active, plus a very large number of damage output with these things. So that is pretty good AA. Now, the concealment is a bit on the meh side with 6.9 kilometers. Like I said, it's a scout cruiser. You don't really have the problem of trying to stealth torpedo in the Ragnar, because the Ragnar does not have any torpedoes. Unfortunately, she also doesn't get any smoke screens, but that's the same thing with most of them. So you do get an additional heal, and you do have more hit points. So again, it's a gun-only scout cruiser. Now, where have we seen gun-only ships before? Exactly, in Tier 9 with the Friesland. The difference being that the Friesland has all the smoke screens. So the Friesland is the noob version of this, where you go out into the middle of the ocean, pop your smoke, sit comfortably, and just dakka away until somebody actually learns how to blind fire. Then you're no longer doing that. But in most cases, that works out reasonably well. The Ragnar can't do that. Now you could say, oh, well, you just zip around in the battle. But the thing is, the Ragnar has the Halland's engines. She doesn't zip around anywhere. They are Japanese cruisers that are faster than this thing. Which makes it a bit more challenging to play. Similar to the Groningen, actually. And I personally enjoy the Groningen a lot more than the Friesland because it's not easy mode, right? You actually have to look where you're going. But maneuverability and speed-wise, the Friesland is obviously the smaller and more maneuverable ship, which leads us to the final ship that I actually want to compare to the Elbing, because she's in some regards actually more similar to the Elbing than to an actual destroyer. And if we look, you don't have quite as many hit points as on the Elbing, but almost. And while you don't have quite the bad maneuverability you have on the Elbing, it's sort of in the middle. And yes, obviously the Elbing has 150s as well, and she's got more of them, so she's got a 6-second base reload. This thing's got half the base reload with 2/3 the guns. So in terms of pure HE spammery, and you would never use HE on the Elbing because she's got murderous AP, but in pure HE spammery, that's kind of where the sweet spot sits for this thing. Obviously, also you don't get any sea mines, but in return you get AA that you can actually use. So, how have I ended setting her up? The build is, well, you could debate about this. You could, if you were so inclined, take the auxiliary armament modification. But yes, Terry, what I hear you say, she doesn't have any secondaries. Why are you buffing the secondaries? Well, not after the secondaries, because she doesn't have any. She does, however, have AA, and this gives 7% on the small caliber AA range. You see where I'm going with this, right? If you're going for a more general purpose build, then just use the main battery mod 2 for more dakka. Not really an awful lot of variation you want to use in slot 2 because propulsion mod, especially that you do need to gunboat out in the open, and this is not the most maneuverable ship, and you do occasionally need to vary your speed as little as there is of it. The propulsion mod is what I would go with. Alternatively, you could get yourself another 50 small caliber AA, but I feel it's quite not worth it. In slot 3, in a destroyer, you would usually go with the concealment mod, and there is a very good argument to be made that in the Ragnar you want to do that as well, because you don't have any smoke screens. Then again, in the Ragnar, what you do is you hold the trigger down and you never let go, because guns is the only thing you got in this thing. So I personally feel more inclined to use the steering gear mod for a better maneuverability, because dodging is key in this ship. You could, of course, get yourself another 50 points of small caliber AA damage if you were so inclined. So, let's say if you want to do the division build and you want to pair with a carrier to guarantee that you're up against an enemy carrier in the game, you could do the full AA build, and it would be quite monstrous and hilarious. But this is sort of what I was going to. Do you want me to show you? Okay, let's have a very quick look. Let's switch to a full AA build, which is obviously not what I'm doing, but just for demonstration purposes to show you what that's going to look like in terms of pure shenanigans. So now we have a 4.7 kilometer range on the large caliber AA, and an over 3 kilometer range with a 600 points of base damage on the small caliber, which is all kinds of hilarious, because with the def AA up, that gets increased by another 15%, and you're basically a walking no-fly zone. So if you want to play with an enemy carrier, and it's a great synergy because you obviously can exploit fires extremely well in this ship with a 7% fire chance. Then yeah, by all means, go for it. But personally, and you obviously would use the AA consumable as well. But personally, I prefer to use the general purpose build, because if I'm not always playing this in a division with a carrier, then this is the more fun option and the more sensible option. I have put the historical camo in it because I figured if somebody I don't know how the ship's coming out. It's probably like a sonar sweep or something of that sort. So I figure if somebody spends money, then they probably all spend more money just to get the historical camo, which gives you hit points range. Large caliber A range would really have been nice to be the small caliber. And torpedo damage reduction, which nobody cares about. Now, before we look at the commander that I've put in, be aware that there is a legendary commander. And this legendary commander has a very specific skill. That is the improved battlefield support, which gives you an additional air defense alert, which you care about. But it also gives you an additional radar, which is extremely valuable on this sort of ship. So that would actually be... That plus the better air defense expert would actually be a really good choice here. He's also got the nowhere to hide skill, which makes your radar last longer and cool down faster. You only have 2, and you don't obviously need the Giant Hunter Plus because the Ragnar does not have any torpedoes. But if you happen to have him around anyway and you're playing him, say, on the main line, then it's totally viable to use that on the Ragnar as well. Have I missed anything? Yes, I have. I have missed the elite ship bonus. Now you can. This is an interesting one, and I am actually going to have to pull up a spreadsheet. You get the choice between improving your HE shell, which gives you 2% damage and plus 7% fire chance. This percentages are obviously not additive but multiplicative. These are factors. So your fire chance doesn't go up to 14%, right? It's just 7 and a cookie. And you do a bit more damage with the shells. The alternative gets a 3% reload bonus. And I did actually run the number, and the raw DPM with the reload time is actually higher than what you would get from the increased HE damage. Now, you could argue that in combination with a better fire chance, this would be worth it. It's not a huge difference. It's a slight difference. And I think these are very much both valuable choices. So you can either go with the numbers that I haven't run is how does a 7% fire chance compare to the increased number of shells that you get on target by using the reload time? Because that sort of probably balance it almost out. So I think they're both extremely good choices, and it's really up to, it's a coin toss which one you want to take. So for testing purposes, I have used the improved reload because I did want to go with a full reload build, which gets the main guns down to 2.58 seconds. So that's the reload that we're operating with, obviously then still modified by the supplies that we're using. Going back to the commander, not an awful lot of non-obvious choices. You do want the additional Def AA, you do want the air defense expert, you definitely want the exploit weakness, and everything else is sort of a little bit up to you. What you want to play with. The engine overload is a good skill to have, not because of the duration, because there are short duration boosts, but because of the 33% cooldown that you're getting out of it. Other than that, I would probably take APCS on these guns, but I don't think either makes a massive difference. You can, if you're weak point targeting, do slightly more damage with the AP, but you're obviously not going to be able to set fires. So if you are targeting a low health battleship and you need to get the maximum damage out, then weak point targeting with AP is a good choice. They're 150s; they will be able to punch through bow stern plating. If you're just trying to set fires, then the other one. And yes, obviously the Giant Hunter doesn't make an awful lot of sense. You would actually go with the Horizontal Protection Expert, which isn't going to make an awful lot of difference either. Anyway, so the Ragnar. Let's try this thing out in battle, and I'll talk a little bit about where I see the ship, what kind of role, and what you kind of can expect. The first round is a 5v5 on Friar's Lantern in domination mode. We are playing Thundra, Zhao, Yoshino, Seattle, and Paolo Emilio. For a destroyer, that's actually less than ideal because the Thundra's got usually HE loaded. There's a bunch of pretty dangerous cruisers and a very fast Italian. So, what kind of ship is this? Well, interestingly enough, the Ragnar is a very good support ship. She doesn't obviously have a very, very high DPS. Now with preheating and with the engine boost running, you get up to 42 knots. But with everything off, cruisers can overtake this thing. So positioning is, you can see the engine boost is already off, and we're down to 35 knots. Cruisers can outrun this thing, so, and you don't have any good ways of disengaging other than, well, going undetected, which, again, if you are in range of a cruiser, especially a radar cruiser, isn't very easy. So you do need to be a little bit careful with your positioning. You do have the one radar to counter enemy destroyers, so you do have to be careful with it unless you are running the Legendary Commander. But you have the boosts available to use. Now, without torpedoes, and I'm going with a Colbert here, so we do have some opportunity of playing together. Without the torpedoes, you need to... Your main damage output against larger targets is going to be from fires. So you do need to find some synergy. And we are spotted. So there is the Paolo Emilio and there's the Seattle. Now the Seattle I'm not super afraid of at this range. But the Yolo Emilio obviously has the potential, and there he is, has the potential of causing some trouble. So I'm going to get the radar up, not so much for myself, but for the Colbert, and let's see if we can do something. I should have been switching to the AP here, to be honest, but the HE is sufficient to punch through the Emilio, and I think I should be out of torpedo range mostly, but let's get out of there. Engine boost up, and I think, oh yeah, there come the Emilio's torpedoes. I appear to have been just within range, to be honest. I've taken 2, but as you can see, the Ragnar is a very sturdy ship. She's got a relatively large hit point pool, and she's got 4 heals. So you can be a little bit more aggressive with your initial and a bit more risk taking with your initial work. But we have taken down the Emilio. That leaves the Seattle now. I don't want to get anywhere close to Seattle because, well, Seattle is dangerous, but in a long-range gun duel, as you can see, the HE is very, very good. It even still does can do full penetrations against the Seattle, and with a 7% fire chance, you are often better off just using the HE and just trying to go for the fires. So this is sort of the long-range duel that you want most of the time, which gives you a sufficient amount of flexibility to dodge when you need it. There comes some airplanes. This is obviously a bot carrier. I am now also coming under fire from the Yoshino, so I do need to sort of get out of here. The Seattle at this range isn't going to be combat effective against me, but the Yoshino is a different question altogether. So yes, that hurts, and it hurts very quickly, and the Yoshino has torpedoes. So we do need to get the heck out of here. That is 1 fire on the Yoshino, that is 2 fires of the Yoshino, yeah. And that right here is the problem. If you find yourself that you've overextended a little bit, you get shut down extremely quickly. You can heal up a fair amount of damage, but you really need to make sure that you are getting out of dodge at the right time, because otherwise you will be overwhelmed very, very quickly. So now I'm obviously trying to go for a perma-fire on the Yoshino. I am again coming under air attack, and Yoshinos are nasty against destroyers, so I do have to... no, I am running low on hit points. That is 1 perma-fire, but I do now have to make my way out of here and get some hard cover between myself and the Yoshino. Obviously there's the Seattle again, so not the greatest amount of farming that we can do here, and I would have liked to, threaten the cap, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. Now the Yoshino I can't really target, so I am firing at the Seattle right now. I think the Colbert is still shooting the Yoshino, but he's now switched targets to the Seattle, so let's see if our combined efforts... And as you can see, the Seattle is completely harmless at 10 kilometers against a target that has good acceleration and some maneuverability, because you can't hit the broadside of a barn from the inside with these American guns at range. There's no reason why the Seattle is so careful. He's actually doing himself a disservice with that. Now he might not know that I don't actually have torpedoes, but the Yoshino has got the AP now loaded and is coming back in as well. So I am trying to get myself undetected by simply using an island between myself and there we go. But unfortunately the carrier is coming in again. So Def AA up once more, and make sure that we're getting closer to the islands to make sure that none of these guys have angles at me while I am spotted. So positional play is very, very essential, and as if you're fighting one of these things, be aware that they need to be at long range to be effective. They can be doing quite a bit of damage at close range as well, but because they have no torpedoes, they generally lack the DPS to finish off a target quickly. Okay, I am on fire again. So that is the Seattle HE spamming. I was trying to get fire onto the Yoshino. If that Colbert could get it into his mind to cap B, that would be lovely, because we are running behind low on points at this point. And I am coming under carrier air attack again. Once again, it's a bot carrier, so it's not too dangerous, but you know, it's quite fun to see the planes splashing left, right, and center around you. And apparently the Colbert has died. I don't know what killed him, but that means I'm gonna have to head over to BCAP, and I'm trying to pull a kill back here on the Seattle, but it looks like we'll be running out of time before we can finish off these low hit points cruisers. There is still the Yoshino out there somewhere as well, but obviously now I am trying to cap still, but I think that's not going to help anymore. It's more about just finishing off these cruisers and trying to pull the kills back, but I think we're so far behind on points at this stage that we're not really going to be able to do an awful lot. And there comes the Yoshino. I'm poking out next to the Yoshino. He knows that I'm here, and that's the end of me probably. Yep, there we go. We had no chance of winning, so if I had torpedoes and took out the Yoshino with me, still wouldn't have been enough. But the Ragnar is not a ship that you would necessarily use for caps and for capture control, because you have relatively little utility. You have no smokes. You're a slow ship. You have no torpedoes. She's much better suited as a clear skies factory, as you can see here, because shooting down 30 aircraft is relatively easy in this ship. And yeah, we had an AFK Des Moines. But yes, if you are in a cruiser, don't be afraid to rush this thing. Now in the second game, we are up against an actual carrier. It is center control and cage, and we're fighting Haku, Monty, Stalingrad, Ibuki, and 3 destroyers, Yuyang, Daring, and Shima. We do have an Austin on our side, which is good, and a Midway, which should hopefully help a little bit as well. Center control, like I literally just said, it's not a perfect ship for controlling capture circles. What I can do, however, is provide AA support to my team, especially to that Zhao and that Yamato, and maybe to the Marceau early on, but now he spawns on the completely other side. So I will definitely get into the capture circle, but I'm not going to get around the center, the middle island, because I have no torpedoes, I have to defend myself against enemy destroyers. I just don't have the DPS to deal with them. You need to play smart on these things. So I am switching over to armor piercing. Why is that? Because there are 3 destroyers, and while the AG is great, the AP has a slight edge in terms of damage and penetration. And if I want to finish off an enemy destroyer quickly, then AP is generally the weapon of choice, and I can always switch back to HE against any other target. And obviously the other thing I'm going to try and do is actively get myself into range of these fighters. Now, once my small caliber AA actually gets in range, the large caliber doesn't do an awful lot, but the small caliber AA, yes, as you can see, is shredding through enemy air wings like there's no tomorrow. So this initial Haku strike isn't getting anywhere with our death ball here. I am shooting now at an Ibuki, and while the AP is not a bad choice at this thing, it's a Japanese destroyer, it's a Japanese cruiser, but I will switch back to the HE and see if I can do something about setting a permafire, or at least shoo him out of the capture circle again. And as you can see at 10 kilometers, if you use your propulsion module, you can dodge quite a little bit of things. Now there's a Daring. Okay, Daring smokes up. I do need to know where he's going, so I am going to waste the radar on that Daring smoke, even though it's short duration, just to make sure I see where he's going. Okay, so he's going around the outside. Team calls out, careful, there's a Daring coming around our flank. We are by now in a turtle death ball sort of configuration. So I know the daring's out there, and I'm saying, yep, no problem, I've got this, guys. We're holding the capture circle. Our left flank is coming now under air attack because the carrier has realized that there's nothing he can do about this one. But the friendly carrier is starting to take the daring under fire. And team's calling out, careful, there's a daring. Yep, I know. I've got the island between myself and him, and Austin is helping out as well. So the daring isn't coming out of here. But if he remains in there, I am just literally going to wear him down with armor piercing, because these are 150s. So now he has to come out because the carrier is torpedo dropping him, which means I'm going to full ahead. He's probably going to torpedo drop us because there's a whole gang of us. But the daring is now a very dead daring, and I can just engine boost out of there. And yeah, there come the daring torpedoes. So everybody, you should now be aware that these exist. And that flank run's completely stopped. Now our left flank has collapsed, which means there are 2 destroyers on the left, but we do have an Austin over there, which means I will try to assist with pushing that Monty back out of the capture circle. And, you know, also trying to farm some damage, because at long range against destroyers, man, not the best ship here. I can push a little forward now because there comes a Shima, and it looks like the other destroyer is doing is on a long range, is running around the flanks here, and I'm just basically doing AA duty for the death ball, because well, we do have an Austin here as well. And I'm not sure if the battleship here was with us. I think it was the Yamato. So the enemy carrier, I think, is starting to run out of patience and or planes. So he just doesn't want anymore. He wants to go back to port, like very clearly, and wants to get egg out of here because he's not getting anything done against this AA concentration. So he's just Leroy Jenkinsing forward. Yes, Shima, I see you. No, I'm not interested in fighting you just right now. We've still got an Austin over there. He can handle this sort of thing better than I can. And switch to the armor piercing to get some damage in, but Yamato takes him out. Yes, please target the AA destroyer with your remaining air wings. That is a great call. Please leave my team alone. I can take that. And again, don't forget how tanky this ship is. I mean, not necessarily tanky in terms of armor, but she can take a bit of punishment because you do have the 4 heals. And you've got a relatively large hit point pool. So Ibuki being the largest threat. Okay, for Shima, it looks like we've lost our Austin. So the Shima is going to be a bit of a problem now. Midway takes out the Ibuki. And at this point, yeah, that Monty is pretty much dead. And at this point, I can start destroyer hunting as well. So I am. Well, do I need to help? Nope, don't need to help with the Monty. Okay. At this point, I can start destroyer hunting. We've shot down 21 planes so far, and that isn't from lack of trying or anything. That's simply because we were in a death ball and with an Austin, and the carriers died halfway through. Otherwise, we probably easily do the 40. Carrier drops to Shima, and now it's just up to us to try and get some hits onto that thing. Once we actually get lucky, that Shima is now running, and look what the carrier is doing. The carrier is running away from the Yu Yang. And is keeping fighters over the Shima to keep him spotted, which allows me to keep shooting the Shima, because obviously Shima outspots me easily, and if the Shima was going to stop shooting his guns, he would go undetected. But Shima knows that they're carriers, so there's no way he's going to get undetected. So he may as well sell his life dearly, but he literally doesn't stand a chance being out in the open. He's never going to outgun me, and. He's playing well. I mean, look at this. He's dodging masterfully, but at the end of the day, I'll eventually wear him down with the 150s. And yeah, against the armor piercing on these on these guns, he really doesn't stand a chance. So the Ragnar, it's not a ship that necessarily does 100,000 points of damage easily, and it's not a destroyer hunter. But it's a very, very good support ship. If you can find some synergy with your team, especially with friendly carriers, you can give AA support, you can give long-range gunfire support, you can set fires very well in the ship. And it's just an outright good ship. It's a fun ship to play. It's not overpowered. Like it's not a pure farming ship like the Friesland. It's a ship where you kind of have to play a little bit smart around your positioning. You have to make sure you sort of know what you're doing, but you can be really, really helpful to the team. and just annoy the heck out of the enemy team by dodging return fire and get your guns on target. So this is a fun ship. I like this ship. It feels similar to the Groningen in some way. It's an interesting setup. It's not the usual thing, and it allows for some interesting ways to play. So good ship in my opinion. And that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.